Hi, my name is Bree, and this is the Powered by Herts podcast. In this podcast, I get to speak to some of the University of Hertfordshire's most incredible graduates about how they overcame their biggest challenges and how they achieved their professional success. I also get to help you get ahead by getting specialist advice from Herts experts. So for today's episode, we have someone truly, truly remarkable with us, an incredible graduate by the name of Farida ElSharkawy. So in 2019, Farida became the youngest African to reach Mount Everest base camp at just 17 years old, which is an incredible achievement. She then went on to complete a mass media and communications degree at the University of Hertfordshire's partner institution, INTI, in Malaysia. And now Farida is a features manager at Rise Up and has delivered TED Talks about her climbing experiences. So Farida, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for such a warm introduction.
How's it going? How's everything?
All good. I'm great.
Amazing. So I want to jump back right to the beginning of your climbing journey. So, I mean, you had an incredible achievement at 17 years old, but when did it all start for you?
It started way when I was younger. I've been always an athlete. I used to play basketball. My mom was a former professional player. She used to play at the national team. I've always seen her, at least when I got born, and I got a little grown up. I've seen her travel, get prepared for her matches, and I've always had the excitement of being an athlete and working hard to achieve or win a match in that context. So this is when I followed her path for a little bit, and I actually played a couple of other sports. So I remember when one time I had to go for a school trip when I was young to climb a very small mountain here in Egypt. And it just hits me when you have to climb all the way up and then you get rewarded by the view. It's as simple as I could put it in. So this is when I knew that this is, what I want to start practicing, along with running marathons, especially when I do that for a cause. So I started joining climbers group and communities that climb or run marathons for a cause. And then I got hit by the opportunity to actually train for a year and a half or a year, and climb Mount Everest base camp for a cause as well. So this is when, I had to fight for it and get it all along.
Wow. That's amazing. I really love the fact that your mum inspired you. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So in terms of your own journey, I mean, Mount Everest is the Earth's highest peak, number one. But it's the ultimate challenge, and goal for so many climbers. So what was that turning point for you, just kind of taking it more seriously and doing the marathons in tandem to that? How did it then morph into, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go and climb Mount Everest?
I got to know one of the climbers. She was the leader of the expedition, and she was very supportive. I remember she kept telling me that there's an opportunity that we can do. It was with a Facebook community leadership program, and she wanted me to join. And she told me, I'm going to support you all along through your practice and training and diet and everything, because
Wow.
I had to change my lifestyle somehow.
Right.
And part of that is giving up hanging out with my friends because I have to go to the gym, or I have to, you know, practice, or there's so many things that I had to do. So she sat with me, and I had to understand the consequences of that decision and everything that it has to come. It's not that I'm being excited about a project or a climb or an expedition and I just want to go for it. It's much, much bigger than that. And it was also for a cause, and it's to prove that women that come from different backgrounds, is there to be able to do anything. And if women can climb the base camp of the highest mountain in the world, they can do anything. And that was to specifically raise awareness about inclusivity, tolerance, and equality among different women from different colors and races and religions. So this is when it really hit me, when I had to grasp all the information initially in, initially. And then, you know, I took the decision and I started to, and it took me 3 months to convince my parents.
Wow. I can imagine. Wow. No, do you know what? What a way to, when you spoke about the cause and why you were doing it, inclusivity, etc. What a way to stand for that, because I feel like this is the ultimate kind of challenge to overcome, to support that cause. So I love that you spoke about the physical sacrifices and changes you had to make, but also the social and like, and I'm sure there's other like mental challenges that you had to overcome. So can you talk about that part of preparing for that climb?
I think the one thing I actually missed, and I've only realized the moment I landed in Nepal, is the mental part. They've told me you have to get mentally prepared for this. My parents have been trying to also prepare me, but I wasn't. My focus was only on physical tolerance or my body being able to actually do it. The things I was giving up for before I travel and do the expedition, I was 100% okay with, and I had peace with the fact that I'm not hanging with my friends, or sometimes I actually skip school. And I remember they came in and they said that we're going to sponsor you, but you have to pay for the flight tickets. And I didn't want to ask my parents to pay for the flight tickets because it was a bit much. And I also wanted to take the responsibility of my decision. So I also decided to work. And this is actually where my career started, where I am now. It wasn't a side hustle or like a side job. It was actually a job that I landed when in events management. So I had to go to school when I was a senior. And you know how critical that is in,
Yep.
you know, it's it's do or die. It's, you know, the where it determines your entire future. And I had to work and I had to train excessively. So of course the last thing I would be able to do is my social life or the things that I have to tolerate mentally. I was ignoring all that part, putting it under the rug and only focusing on the goal, making sure that I'm being, you know, abiding by the trainings. Even my mom had to go with me every time I trained, so she makes sure that I'm keeping it up. I have an actual progress and all that. So yeah, skipping school, and I had to, because I had to go work, and then, you know, I finish work and then I go train. So you know, I wasn't allowed to use elevators during this year.
Oh,
Yeah, so
wow.
I only had to use the stairs, no matter how high the floor is, no matter where I am.
You have to use the
you,
stairs.
I have to use the stairs.
Wow.
It's a huge part of the training. And then after some point, we had to use masks that reduce the oxygen because I'm living in a sea level.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to use the masks, reduce the oxygen level, and then you take the stairs. So you could train your body to acclimatize about what's going to happen to it. Um, so yeah, back to the mental part where I didn't actually bear it into consideration, and it was such a fallback when I actually traveled and I started my expedition. I think like it was very, you know, underrated. It wasn't taken. I took it for granted, or I don't know what I felt at the time, but I just, you know, ignored it and then took all my way. But it is something very, very important to always bear, because if your mind cannot function, if your mind isn't convinced that this is, you know, what you can do, if you don't believe that you can do it, your body wouldn't be able to do it, even if your body can do it, you know?
Yes,
So
right.
yeah.
What an incredible lesson on, I mean, there were a few gems that I picked up from what you were saying, but mind over matter, and even, the balancing act between school, work, training. What an incredible message for women as well. Because often it does feel like we have to sacrifice something, but you did it all, at least, to the best of your ability. So that's incredible. But that definitely sounds difficult. So I think it adds to the achievement. So you've taken us through quite an in-depth summary of your preparation before it. When you're actually doing the climb now, I want to kind of speak about that difficulty and those challenges. What was that like? And I can imagine, some of the mental blocks that you spoke about, you had to overcome them in the moment. What was that experience like?
So let me briefly explain what's the actual danger of climbing the mountain. And it's something called altitude sickness. So basically, the altitude sickness is when the oxygen level drops and the pressure gets high. So your internal, your body is not having enough oxygen that you're breathing in, and at the same time, the pressure is high. So this is when your organs or your body dysfunctions. When you get hit by altitude sickness, it kills you. So you have to descend immediately. Our trip was for 14 days. I had the altitude sickness on day 3.
No. Day 3.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to continue because how did we get to day 14?
So let me also picture that. We were 14 women from 11 different nationalities. The next person that was older after me was 30 something. So I was the little baby, literally. No matter how much effort I try to put to, like, I wanna seem strong. I wanna don't make them feel like I'm a little baby or anything. Either I like it or not, they're just treating me as, their little baby. Yeah. So I remember, because there are things that I didn't, pay attention to that I was told. And this was also another lesson. They told me that I have to hydrate very well. We had to put something called direct electrolytes. It's like a mix of nutrients inside of our water. And then you have to make sure that you manage the time where you drink the water among all the hours that we do the trekking in, so you wouldn't lose the water too soon or not drink enough water. So the thing is, I didn't the first 2 days I didn't drink enough water, because when I put the electrolytes inside of my bottle, it makes the taste not, at least I would say, not what I've been used to.
Right, okay.
And as silly as it sounds, this was my first hit where there's no space or luxury for me to, think outside of the box or think that I'm going to be outsmarting whatever rules or whatever guidance that I'm being told
Right.
to. When you're told to do something, you have to abide it, or it would cost you your life. This is how big it could come.
Right.
And the symptoms hit, and the symptoms would include nausea, dizziness. You would feel numbness in all your ends of your body parts, and it would actually hurt, because when you sit the wrong way and then you stand up and then you feel that pain for a few minutes.
Yeah.
This is like a continuous pain that I have to, I had extreme abdominal pain. My stomach hurt really bad. We stopped, having to be able to taste food or to be able to smell it.
Sounds like your whole body's just shutting down.
Yeah, it's shutting down. It's shutting down. And I was lucky that the day I was hit with it, we had to acclimatize on that day. We didn't have to, continue going up. So they said, we'll give you an exception for 24 hours, not an exception, but we're staying at the same altitude level. So we're going to stay, and if you don't get better the next morning, you'll have to descend. And this is where it hit me. Did I do all this? Skipped school, had to bring out the money, told my parents that I'm going to do it. I also have like a backstory that my final exams were scheduled the same 14 days of where the expedition was.
No.
I had to fight for it, and there's so much that happened. I've told everyone was saying you're not going to be able to do it, and now I'm not going to be able to do it. So I I had so much of resilience, and I was so mad. And I remember one of the climbers came in, and she sat with me before we went to sleep on that third day when I was really, really sick. My face was blue and it was blown. Yeah, it's not the prettiest, I would say. And she came in and she told me, Farida, you are our little black pepper. You are as little as a pepper, but also as strong as a black pepper. So you have to know where you stand in, and you have to make sure that you are not going out of your way as a little kid that wants to prove it herself in any way. And you need to do whatever is being told, because this is serious. If you thought that you were, it didn't hit you yet, you need to realize that.
Yeah.
And this was my first strike, when I realized, oops, I think I need to, if I want to do this, I need to have, better determination, or I would say being disciplined, because I wasn't. So I remember I had honey that day that tasted really, really bad. And I had like a couple of food that I didn't want to eat, but I had to. And then I prayed, and then I didn't even want it to call, there's internet on the mountain, at least in the first, few days.
Wow.
This is something that most of people don't know.
Yeah, would never have thought.
Yeah. There's 3G, but there's no bathrooms.
Imagine priorities.
Yeah. So I remember that day my mom video called me and I didn't want to answer because I didn't want to see my face. And I was like,
Cool.
I feel a little bit sick and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to have to sleep. And I had an agreement with both of my parents that I have to check in every hour, tell them I'm alive, check in. Just, hi, I'm here, I'm okay. For one, like every hour. And I remember I skipped that hour where they got really, really anxious about it. And then, I decided to take that night all by my own and reflect on all the things that I need to be focusing on. And not only improving it on the spot, but remove myself from the equation. It has to be selfless. And because you also need to give the rest of the team the energy and, the motive. Because when, this is also something I didn't realize. When you see some part of us or any of us falling down, you also get demotivated, don't feel well when you know that another climbing is not feeling well. So I also had this responsibility, and it was amazing how a team works. So yeah, I remember I slept that day and I woke up the next morning. They took my vitals and stuff and they said, you might be good to go, but we'll see like on the fourth day. And then I started to get a little bit better. So yes, I have had to stay in for 2 days, and then we were called off on the sixth day, and they told me not to sleep in middle of the day. You don't have to, you shouldn't be sleeping in the middle of the day. We wake up by the sunrise and we sleep after sunset.
Oh wow, okay.
Because you can't sleep during that time because it's probably the temperature would hit really, low or high, depends on if it's the sunrise or the sunset. There's, a drastic change in the weather. So it's not advised that you would sleep in during that time. And I remember I came back on the sixth day and I told them my biological clock works and I function very well only if I sleep in the middle of the day. And I didn't also pay attention. This was my second strike. And I slept before the sun set after we finished our trek.
Right.
And I forgot to take my socks off. The socks are wet because I sweated,
Okay.
And the temperature dropped. So both of my feet were frozen.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't sure where you were going, but frozen.
Yeah.
So what's the remedy?
Yeah, this was a mistake. I had to take, we usually wear two socks. I had to take both of them off because they're wet. So I didn't. And I remember I screamed, but then I wasn't able to actually scream. I didn't have the energy to scream, but the inside of me, I cannot bear the pain. And luckily, the other climber that was with me inside of the tea lodge, we used to sleep inside the sleep bags, but in tea lodges. The tea lodges are usually similar like houses, but like they're very thin wood, if I would say. So just actually to protect us from, any outside weather or the snow or anything.
Right.
So she heard my breathing patterns. I was trying to, call for help, but I couldn't. So she had to come in, and then she kept asking me what's wrong, and I couldn't answer. And then she opened the bean bag and she saw my legs and she screamed, and then everyone had to wake up. And this was also like, strike number 2, where it was a bigger lesson. And this is when they told me you will not be able to continue. And first thing in the morning is you'll have to descend.
Wow.
Yeah. And, this is when I started to actually give up. I was too tired. I was too sick. I wasn't even sure if I'm going to be able to do it. And, it's very hard when you distinguish between your body not being able to continue or you just being,
Right.
adamant about it.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a thin line. There's a thin line when you have to always communicate anything that you're feeling and what's actually worth paying attention to and what's like a normal, symptoms or something that's usually happened to any climber. And I think this was the hardest mental, challenge that I had to go through. And at this point, it was the opposite, where my body was giving up and my mind isn't.
Yes. Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So it was hard, and one of the biggest reasons that I was able to do this expedition and actually to succeed in climbing was the other girls that were with me. Every time we would see someone falling a little bit back or not feeling very well, I remember one time I finished my water too early, and another climber, she gave me the water that she had left, although she didn't have any to continue. This is survival instinct. You are not nice when you do this. You don't have to do this. But I remember this is one time that she did that. And another time when I was too tired and someone had to go, the backpack we had on our back is the only resources, supplies that we have all 14 days. And it's 8 kilograms at least. And I was feeling very dizzy and numb at the same time. So I had, we are in a very tight trek. The right side is thousands of meters down the mountain. If you fall, you die obviously immediately. And on the left side was the mountain itself. And I was very dizzy that I couldn't control my balance. I was at risk that I would actually fall. And one other climber, they're different, by the way. Every time I have a story to each of them, they're different people. They're not just one person. I remember she took my bag and she doubled the weight on her back. So I would be able to finish off this, we had a 30-minute walk through it. So then I would be able to have, a better trek to use and then have my back on my back. So yeah, there's a lot of emotions and there's a lot of learnings that I had to, learn it.
I mean, firstly, just so I can resolve the story in my head, how do you defrost your feet? What was that process?
Oh, okay. So the only way to actually cause a fire is to get something that you could use to react. There's nothing that we can use to react with fire. The only thing would be to collect the poop of the animal that they use for transportation. It's called a yak.
Yeah.
So the guides called that everyone, as much as we can, has to go outside of the lodge in a freezing temperature, use their shirts, pick up the poop, put it in their shirts, and then come back. And then we can, use the fire to defrost my feet. And I remember the shepherd, they're called shepherds, the one that lives on the mountain and take you through, the guides, basically. He told me time is your savior. So we'll either have enough, like, we're either going to do this quick and make sure that whenever we're like, I'm sorry if I'm going to explain this in detail, but when you take off the socks, your skin might be coming off with it, If it's too late, it might happen. If it's not, then you're blessed.
Okay.
And they all ran out. We were 14 women, all 13 women, including the videographer. He was the only guy in the trip. They went out straight, used their flashes. They started to collect it, search for it, and then they came in back and they used the fire to help me out. And thankfully, I didn't have any. I had a very small part of my skin in my ankle that was taken off.
Wow.
But then both of my feet are well and I came from it. But then I remember it was extremely, extremely emotional and it was very challenging to, gasp it in.
Oh my, honestly, I'm speechless. What a journey. What, literally and figuratively. I mean, one of the most moving themes that I can pick up just from, the summary you've given is just and because obviously it was a group of women, the sisterhood and the support. And I even was, going to mention it when you were speaking about how your mum helped you with training and stuff like that, and how the support seemed like it was there early on. But to hear it continue through the actual walk, it sounds like that's also a huge part of the experience, the team that you're a part of. So yeah, that's really lovely. Would you agree?
Yes, of course, 100%. And this also proves that you don't have to be on your own to be able to do
Yeah.
it. Sometimes you need a little help. Sometimes you actually need it
Yeah.
to be able to continue. And this was also one of my biggest learnings.
Yeah.
The I'm hyper independent mood thing is not specifically, your
Yeah.
way out. So I learned afterwards, growing up now, asking for help was one of the very most, you know, helpful way that I know that would be helping me out through my life in general.
Yeah. No, and I do want to speak about how these takeaways from the experience have, impacted your life. But before we even go there, I want to ask about what you described as the reward, which I think is a really nice way of putting it. How was it when you reached the base camp?
I
What
cried. I
I can
cried
imagine.
like a baby the moment I saw, the base camp was written on a rock and the year was written. And then the moment I saw it, I cried, and it was very emotional. I couldn't believe my eyes. And I was like, I slept on the ground and had to lean my back, this is it. And I remember I have a video they caught of me when I was telling them the moment I arrived.
Yeah.
And I was reflecting on it now. I was saying, I didn't think that I would actually be able to do it. I was pushing myself through up until I started the expedition. The moment I started, and I started all the fallbacks and everything that has been happening, not only to me, but also to the other stories of each climber and the experience of each of them living through the things that we had to go through them. It was magnificent. I fell in love, and I knew this is exactly what I've been trying to tell people here in my home country.
Mm.
This is where it pays off. This I had to convince so many people and ask, so especially what happened in school. I told them at the time,
Yeah.
I want you to postpone my exams, and in return, I learned how to create an MOU when I was 17, and I created a partnership presentation deal telling them that if they postpone the exams, I would give them the credit to use my pictures as a marketing, ways on
Oh,
their socials,
I
and
love it.
say that, the student or the graduate from our school, blah, blah, blah. And even if I didn't make it, I would still be the youngest to step foot inside the Himalayas. So both ways you're winning. So
Yeah.
convinced them to postpone the exams. And it actually worked, obviously.
I love
So the moment I saw the base camp and we had we started taking pictures, and each one of us had to use their flags, their home country flags, and raise it and all. It was a moment of pride, and a moment where we didn't have network, obviously, at that time. It was too high. But I recorded myself, and I told my mom that she should be very proud of me after all that, bearing that some of information that I've hid from her. For example, if you Googled now the world's most dangerous airport, you would find it's an airport in Nepal called Lukla. And
Yeah.
it takes you from the city of Nepal, Kathmandu, to the Himalaya mountains.
Oh no.
And the reason why it's the world's most dangerous airport is because there's so many planes fall off because they never land on an actual ground,
Right.
and the oxygen is not stable, so it depends where the path goes in. And I remember before we flew, they told us, if you have any rituals, any prayers, any loved one, any family member that you would like to connect with before you get on the flight, just in case we didn't make it, do it now.
My goodness.
And everyone started calling their loved ones, their spouses, their families. And I didn't have the audacity to call my mom, so I sent her a selfie in front of the plane.
Yeah.
And this was nobody agrees with me on what I'm about to say, and they think I'm evil, but this is what I thought of at the time. I took a selfie in front of the plane and I sent my mom and I told her, this might be the last picture of me. I love you. And then I was gone for 45 minutes.
My goodness.
And I don't need to tell you that these were the worst 45 minutes of my mother's entire lifetime.
All mum's life, of course.
Yeah.
Honestly, and so this, I think this is a great segue to my next question, because again, just hearing everything you've shared, there are key lessons that you've identified, but that, I've identified just hearing your story about fearlessness, especially being told that before you're about to, fly off. Fearlessness, kind of mind over matter, as we said before. How did that shape you as a person? And then how did that help you when it came to studying for your degree? I feel like nothing could phase you after over what you did on the
True,
mountain.
very, very true, actually. This is when I finished the expedition in April 2019, and then I joined university in October the same year. So it was just
Wow.
a few months, in difference. And I was very, very excited. Traveling abroad from my home country is the one thing, especially joining Hertz. I was very excited when I knew that we had a dual degree, and this is when, I was very sure about my decision to fly in and, live alone. I actually have a twin brother, so I didn't technically live alone for some time. But I was very excited to everything that was about to come, and I knew that I've always wanted to study mass communications. So when I joined uni, I had all the energy that would be, needed or required or, unwanted or wanted for my classmates or the teachers or everything that, the journey that I had to begin. This is where I felt very fresh and I was like, you know what, I'm up for it. I'm very excited. Let's do this. So I joined in, and I loved my courses. And I had, take the extra miles and go to my professors and tell them, or my lecturers, and tell them, you know what, I wanted to learn more about this or more about that. I was very opinionated. This is something one of my lecturers would also always tell me. So it actually helped me understand so much about, the practical life and what we get to go through. The moment before I fly into the expedition, I had my breakup just before I flew to the expedition. And then when I came back and I started uni, I started to understand so many things about life. Either from, I had to struggle a little bit. I wasn't able to get along with people my age. My perspective of life has been drastically changed, obviously. So the biggest problems I would, discuss with friends that are 18 or 19 or 20 years old wouldn't be, oh my God, my mom didn't want to give me $20 today to go shop. No, this is not the context that I would be actually enjoying. So I would come along with people, older than me, or people that would teach me something or add value to my life or to my studies,
So this is interesting, because it's true that that sort of character development that you had through training and then climbing, it takes people a lifetime to, do you know what I mean, to get through and achieve. So you have probably superseded your peers. That's I didn't even think about that.
The one thing I've always told people when, if anyone knows about this, they usually feel very overwhelmed. Oh, what did I do when I was 17? Oh, I'm 20 or 30 something and I didn't do this or I didn't do that. And the one thing that is very important for me, that I always say is, everyone has their own Everest. My Everest could be different than your Everest, could be different than from someone else's Everest. So don't compare the challenges that someone would be going through, or the social achievement that you would see someone would doing, compared to your life or compared to the things that you get to go through. And Everest could be someone going through a breakup, or someone that a loved one that passed away, or you going or studying in university and working hard to be able to graduate and have good grades, or working in your field and being able to save up to enjoy your life. So this is the one thing, the one takeaway that I would always tell people, not to be very overwhelmed by my or anyone else's story.
Yeah,
If we were going to frame it as a successful, story, but also don't forget that your own story is an Everest on its own.
that's beautiful. I love that. So then bringing it to the present then, you're also a features manager at Rise Up. So can you tell us a bit more about your role and your career since graduating?
So I joined Rise Up in 2021. It was actually one of my, main goals at that time. It's a company where it supports startups to connect it to the most relevant resources worldwide. So the summits that they do or the programs that they create is all about connecting the entrepreneurs or the entrepreneurship scene all in one gathering. We do this. By the time I joined, Rise Up has been in the country for 10 years. So I joined as an outreach and community a coordinator. And then recently, I was promoted to a features manager, where we also expanded in Saudi Arabia as the center of entrepreneurship in Asia. And we are going to the Netherlands this year as well to be the center of entrepreneurship in Europe. And then we're expanding one by one. But yeah, I was very excited to be joining the company. Remember that time, it was one of the biggest, dreams that I had. I was very excited because I've always seen them do a lot of, impact to the entrepreneurs and the startup founders. And I really wanted to join in and be part of this impact. And then I've been, it's almost 3 years, and I love my journey with them. The company has grown and I have grown, and I'm very excited to everything that is about to come.
Amazing. Oh, Farida, thank you so much for joining me today. Honestly, what a path and walk so far. I feel like I've watched a movie with all the peaks and troughs that you took us through. Honestly, no, it's really incredible, and it's super, super encouraging as well. I love how you made your story applicable to everyone by saying that, your mountain was a physical one, but everyone actually can overcome their Everest. And I think for students and graduates, that is really worthy advice and needed advice.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. Before you go, just to check in, what's up next for you? Are you going to climb any more mountains? What's in your plans?
This question, when I was asked like 2 years ago, I would say I wanted to climb Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa. But I think it's been some time since I actually trained or climbed any mountains since COVID hit, and then I got too swamped at work and all the things that has happened. But I'm very, very excited to be back to climbing mountains and have another goal to achieve.
Yeah. Well, you have the rest of your life, so there's no rush.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
amazing. And then finally, how can people keep up with you to see what you're going to be doing in the future?
I'm available on almost all socials, but most actively either on Instagram, on my feed, or my LinkedIn. If anyone wants to connect with me, I'm very active on both.
Amazing. Well, thank you once again. Honestly, I know that I'm encouraged, and I know that all the listeners will be too. So thanks for sharing your story and for your time. And yeah, I'll definitely be plugging in to see what's next.
Yes, thank you so much for having me today.
No worries.
I really enjoyed this, and thank you for all the lovely introduction, everything, listening to my story as well as I appreciate it. And thank you to Hertz for giving me the platform to highlight the story behind this. I really, really do appreciate it, and I'm actually very excited to be part of Hertz and to be, inspiring, if possible, any students or any graduate that be hearing us today.
Yeah, well, you definitely have. So thank you.
Thank you.